دایی یه فرصت خوب حالا پشت مدافعان خداداد عزیزی توی دروازه گل برای ایران خداداد عزیزی باز هم روی زمین گشت سرداران بود و توی دروازه بود گل به نام آزمونده برای ایران
بزنه کریم انصاری گل توی دروازه کریم انصاری دروازه پرتغال باز شد
علی دایی سام توپ توی دروازه
گل اشتباه حرکت از کوچان نژاد فرصت برای کوچان نژاد توی دروازه گل برای ایران.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Goal Bezan. Today it's just myself and Arya. We're doing a very impromptu podcast. It is 10:30 on a Tuesday, but we're here turning up for you guys. So yeah, Arya, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you for having me back on the podcast. It's been a little while, and glad to be on speaking about the national team again, and other things as well.
Yeah, so I guess like what we're going to talk about is the squad for the upcoming fixtures against Hong Kong and Uzbekistan, both in the World Cup qualifiers. Hong Kong being one that we're going to also play in the Asian Cup in January. So I guess it's like the first, like one of two games against them, and then we're going to be talking about I guess like injuries, exclusions, any surprises, and then finish off with the Under-17 World Cup as well. So I guess the two games, Hong Kong, Uzbekistan coming up. These are two teams like we always play. we seem to play them all the time.
Yeah, we've played Uzbekistan 11 times in the last 10 years. This will be our 12th outing against them, which is crazy to be facing a team 12 times in 10 years. And then Hong Kong, we faced them in the previous World Cup qualification campaign. Mark Wilmots was in charge actually at that time. I think we won 2-0 and we beat them again 3-1. And we're playing them in the Asian Cup coming up in January in our group stages. We seem to be playing the same teams quite a lot, is why you can put it between those two teams.
Yeah. So hopefully we get a win in both of those games. I guess the Hong Kong one is an interesting one, given that we're playing them in the Asian Cup as well.
Yeah.
So looking at the squad, I guess first of all, any surprises, any names that jump out of you? I guess the one maybe to highlight is Saman Ghoddos, who obviously won the goal of the month in the Premier League, playing for Brentford. He came on for maybe like 10 minutes and he won the goal of the month, which is quite incredible. So he's obviously in the lineup. Any other names that jump out at you?
Yeah, someone scored a great goal against Burnley a couple of weeks ago. I think he's really performed well this season. He's done well for the national team as well since the World Cup. So I think he's a key player for us. We'll come on to him later on in terms of his position on the pitch. But yeah, I think overall the squad is a good squad that Ghalenoei is called up. He seems to have nailed down his key players that he wants in the squad. Of course, there's a couple of injuries. Pratli Ganji is just injured, so he's not going to be back. I don't know for a couple of more weeks, maybe longer. But I think the bulk of this squad is there. Obviously, he's brought in a few youngsters as well. Jawad Hossein Nejad, who was part of the previous squads as well. He's in. He's done really well for Sepahan this season in the Persian Gulf Pro League, and he did well for the U19s. I believe it was for Iran. So he's in, and I think he'll be a key player, I think, going forward towards the next World Cup. But he has brought in other youngsters that we'll touch on to as well. I just think that the key element for this team is ensuring that there are leaders in that dressing room. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's brought back Omid Ebrahimi, which I think people will criticize because obviously he has what, almost 30. He's 36 years old, and he's injury prone. He's had a few injuries quite long term. So I think in that sense people can criticize that selection, but I do think from a leadership standpoint he does offer a lot to this team because he is a big leader in the dressing room. I never really found Haj Safi to be a great leader. Very experienced footballer, but I wouldn't say he's a great leader. Or even Kariman Sarifar, I wouldn't say they're necessarily leaders in their own right, but they're very experienced players. Whereas I think Omid Ebrahimi does offer that. So it's good to have him in the squad. But other than that, yeah, we'll go on to each position then, and we'll speak about it.
Yeah, I guess before we do that, I guess young players that like stand out for you, because on the last podcast we talked about how it would be good to get more young players because we were playing some friendlies and the young players weren't really being called up as much. And I guess we sort of highlighted that it's a bit puzzling as to why they hadn't been called up or played as much. So I guess given these World Cup qualifiers, which young players are standing out for you?
Well, I think he's called up a good bunch of young players. I think Amin Hasbavi, who we saw do so well for youth national teams, and he's now gone to Qatar with Al Sadd. He's done pretty well there. His last couple of games actually been in good form as well for Al Sadd. So he's going to be a key player, I think, again going forward. Whether Ghalenoei puts the trust in him to start him, because he probably should have started him in one of the previous two games, or at least given him some game time. He didn't do any of that. So hopefully in these next two games, he gives him a little bit of game time. I do feel like Hasbavi needs that step in the national team to go and play. We are in the position where we have Khalil Zadeh at 34 years old, Kanoni 29, but he can be hit and miss, with his attitude. And Majid Hossein is always injured. You know what I mean? So we need reliable young centre backs to come through. So that's a good selection there, in my opinion. But then he's also brought in Allahyar Yousefi, who is a winger, plays for Sepahan as well. Did really well as well for the U20 national team recently. Scored some goals, and he's done pretty well in the Persian Gulf. I think he's got 2 assists and 2 goals in like 5 or 6 games. So again, it's a positive selection in a key area of the pitch where we're starting to see players like Jahan Bakhsh approaches 30 years old now. Torabi is 29. We've got players who are kind of coming towards the latter parts of their prime. Mehdi Mohammadi is also in the squad. He's also 30 years old. So our wingers are a little bit older. Of course, we've got players like Mohebi, who's 24, but reality is we need to bring in more young wingers, and Allahyar Yousefi is a good option to do that towards the next few years. And then finally, the striker he's brought in Saeed Sahar Khizan. He is a striker for Gold Gohar, who again has had a decent start to the season for them, and he also did well for U20. So yeah, there are good selections there for sure. Whether they play and get the experience they deserve or they need, we'll wait to see what happens.
Mm. And I think you're completely right. We were one of the oldest squads at the World Cup, the one that just passed. And I guess what a big call was, after these players retire, what are we going to do? Where are the talents coming from? And I guess now it's a turning point. Seems like a bit of a transition period actually after this Asian Cup, where those players that you mentioned who have been starting for the national team for a long time, they'll move on. But I feel like we've gone through this transition period before. I don't know if you remember. I think maybe the last World Cup or last Asian Cup, there was calls for Jalal Hosseini to be called up because that transition period wasn't working out. The results weren't there, and the new centre backs that were coming in weren't performing. Do you feel like a similar thing might happen in this situation?
Well, there was. You're absolutely. I mean, before the 2018 World Cup, Carlos Queiroz dropped Jalal Hosseini. Now, whether that was a right or wrong decision, it brought out a player like Majid Hosseini, who obviously started because Cheshmi got injured, but eventually he got his time and he moved to Trabzonspor as a result. So we do have to bring in young players and progress the national team. What's very important though, we have to understand this. People always speak about, we've got the same squad as we did 5 years ago. Yeah, we do, similar to what we had 5 years ago. But the reality is, it's a national team. It isn't It isn't an academy. We don't just bring in players for absolutely no reason just because we want to have a young team. That isn't how it goes. That's ridiculous. But when you have talented players such as Javad Hossein Nejad, for example, who's done so well this season for the first club Sepahan, he has to be given that encouragement to come in and show his talents at national team level. Same with Hasbavi, they need to be given encouragement to come in and do that. But the one thing that I would like to always allude to that I think is very important is, again, we are in a top nation in the world. We are a top ranked team. We haven't had successful World Cups in the last couple of editions, even though we've done well performance wise in some games, especially like against Spain and Morocco or whatever. We didn't have successful World Cups. We didn't get to the second round of the World Cup, so we do have to again call up the best players as much as possible. But what's important is we have to make use of the cycle of a World Cup. The 4-year cycle that we have between now and 2026 is a very important cycle, because if we can bring in a guy like Sahar Khizan or whoever, or Yusefi, and produce a player from that talent into someone that's, high level, can go to Europe, do really well, then in 2026 we've got a player who is quote unquote, as we say in Farsi, is somebody who's been cooked. He's cooked. He's ready to do well at a high level. So that's what we need to work on, is can we progress our generation that we currently have and bring in young talents who are talented but already have a little bit that we know in the next few years can become relevant for us in the World Cup.
And we'll talk about, I guess, like the younger players even still, so the under 17s towards the end of the podcast. So do stick around for that, because I think that also brings up a lot of, I guess, notable things that, like, I guess could be beneficial as well. So I guess, like, honing in on the positions of this squad, you already mentioned a few injuries. So you mentioned Allahyar, you mentioned Pirelli Ganji,
No, Allahyar's not injured. Allahyar's not injured. We'll come on to him later.
Oh, he's not been injured?
No. We'll come on to him later, yeah. Well, keep going, sorry.
Okay, so Pirelli Ganji, Qolizadeh. Okay, so those are the injuries. Pirelli Ganji we talked about in the last episode, following his like pretty reckless challenge. So I guess, like, from the positions, so defense, midfield, attackers, any sort of surprises that jump out of you that you want to highlight? I think they're all pretty standard, apart from like the young players that we mentioned.
Well, goalkeepers are as it is. I think that's the best 3 goalkeepers we currently have. I think defenders, again, I think he's called up the best we have at this point. I don't think there's any more you could really do with that. Obviously, Pirelli Ganji's injured, so he chose to bring in Mohamed Donishgar and obviously Mohamed Ghorabani, who, again, another youngster come in. He's 22 years old. He can play centre back, but also defensive midfield, where he has been more for Sepahan. But yeah, defense is defense. That's the best we could do really with it. I don't think there's any changes there that are going to happen in the next couple of years.
I guess the notable thing is the fullback position, because you have Mohammadi and you have Moharami, and like which one sort of starts, I guess. But
yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I think
Moharami
Reza Yan are always a toss up in selection. Reza Yan is a little bit more favoured over Moharami at national team level. I think Moharami is a talented player. He's done really well at club level. He's being quite a regular starter for Dinamo Zagreb, which was always the issue with him, is can he be a regular starter? And he is now. He's done really well for Dinamo Zagreb over the last couple of seasons. But Ramir Zayan gives us an extra element, which is his crossing ability, which I don't think Moharami
set pieces
has. I don't think Moharami, now that we know the player quite well, I don't think that's really his forte. But what he gives is a lot of energy and pace, which is really important against teams who have maybe slower flanking players. And then obviously Haj Safi and Mohammadi, who are obviously teammates at AEK Athens. I wouldn't say it's a toss up because I think Hoy Safi is a better choice than him. But Mohammadi's obviously he scored he scored against the last team, didn't he? We played against. So I think he scored a goal in our second last game or whatever it was, against Jordan. Or sorry, against against Jordan. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, he did.
I think
So
so. I don't know.
so yeah,
I can't remember.
he did. So yeah, they're the best two options we have.
And then I guess like midfield, obviously you mentioned Ebrahimi coming back. I think the only real question mark is whenever he comes on, he does get injured very, very quickly. So as long as he can kind of stay fit, I've got no problem with this. I think he brings a load of experience, and he's also very good on the ball. I like how he plays. He breaks down the play very well, but I guess the question mark is age, how much he can run, and injury prone.
I don't think he'll be playing for this for these two for match. I don't think Ghalenoei
I don't think he'll be playing either.
Will start him. I don't
No.
see it, but a good option again for leadership for this national team, especially when you have young players coming through. Like for example, you got Gorbani who plays the same role as him. It's a good thing to have him in the squad. Omid Ebrahimi used to play for Sepahan, so he has that kind of. He gives good leadership skills for these youngsters to feed off of. I think in the national team, but I'm obviously really impressed how Ali Karimi has been getting on in Turkey. He's doing well. He scored a goal recently as well, so maybe he plays. But I really liked when Ghalenoei chose to play with Saman Ghoddos and Izzatullahi as a midfield pairing in the middle. I think that really works, especially against these lesser nations in Asia. I think that works really well. I think Saman has really developed into a much more mature midfielder than maybe he used to be. I think he used to be more of an advanced, attacking-minded player. Used to be a striker at times, at club level, but now I see him more as a not defensive-minded player, but somebody who can do both jobs, forward and backwards. And he looks a lot more. He looks a lot fitter this season. I don't know if you agree with me, Sina. He looks a lot fitter.
I do agree.
I
agree.
I think
he was. Sorry to interrupt. I mean, he was taking up roles against Qatar like far deeper than what I was used to seeing him. So he was like, demanding the ball from the centre backs, going far behind, and
but he can do that.
It was very cool.
He can do that.
Of course, he can do that.
Because he has the quality. He has the quality on the ball. People will say he's not the quickest player or the most hard-working footballer in the world. That could be true, but he has the quality which we don't necessarily have in that role. So we need that in this national team in that position. So hopefully he continues playing him there. Obviously we have Ahmad Nourallahi as well, who we all know what I think about him. But let's keep going.
And then attackers, you have Taremi, Osman, and Sarifad. I guess there's no, and obviously you got the two others, but I mean, it doesn't really seem like a surprise here. It would just be Taremi and Osman. Well,
the wingers first and foremost. I think Jahan Baksh and Mohibi are kind of at the moment nailed down for that role until Qorizadeh comes back in. We'll see how that kind of changes the landscape of the wingers. But yeah, for the strikers, Osman, Taremi. Osman scored a great goal recently for Roma. I just don't see how that move really benefits him as on loan, especially.
They've got a lot of that's another one.
Yeah, exactly. So I just don't see how that move benefits him, especially towards the second half of the season. As you're saying, Ibrahim will come back in January, hopefully by that time, and then Osman won't have really any game time because Tammy Abraham's a key player for Roma. So I just don't see how that move was made. But hopefully he continues to score some goals this season. Reza Asadi has come back in as well. He scored a nice free kick for Sepahan. He's a player who played in centre back for Tiraktor a few seasons ago. He was playing in midfield for Saipa before that. For Persepolis, he was playing as a striker, midfielder at times, and now, and when he was in, he was also playing in Austria as well recently. He was also a midfielder and he got injured quite badly, but now he's a striker. So he's played everywhere, literally in every position, just not being a goalkeeper yet. So good to see that he's become what he is become, but I don't think he should be relied upon as a key player for this national team. I think we have better strikers than him. I really want to see Allahyar come back in the mold. I know he's had an ACL injury. He's still not back. I think he's been out of action for about 6 months now with the ACL tear that he had last season. So hopefully Allahyar gets himself back as well. But other than that, the squad, it picks itself. I think it's a good squad by Ghalenoei, and the only player who wasn't called up, maybe deserved it in quotation marks, is Mehdi Ghayedi, who's done fairly well for Kalba in UAE, but it is what it is. I don't think Ghayedi's a game changer, for this national team. And obviously Allahyar as well, who hasn't played for Hull City.
We'll talk about that now, actually. But I mean, with Osman, you're right. Like it was a weird move to Roma. He did score a very nice goal, but I mean, with Leverkusen smashing in the Bundesliga at the moment, you can't help to think that maybe he would have maybe helped that lineup and continue their form going into the second half of the season.
Yeah,
but
they've been brilliant, Leverkusen, this season under Alonso, but he's not there, so can't do much about it.
So talking about Allahyar, so I guess he's come back from injury. He's in the squads playing for Hull City, but he's not starting. I think he came on as a sub for 5 minutes in one of the games a few weeks ago. Yep. What's going on there? Like, why has he gone from, I guess, like being a very strong contender for the national team to now not getting any game time for Hull City?
Well, Allahyar should be in the national team. He should be. It's very sad that he isn't, but it's understandable from the coach's perspective why he isn't. He hasn't played a lot of games. He hasn't started really any games this season for Hull City. He hasn't scored any goals either. Allahyar had an injury in the summer. He was told that he was going to be a starter this season, and then they made a couple of signings. The management made a couple of signings in Hull City, and as a result, you make signings in a club. Most of the time, those players are told, or the coach is kind of encouraged to start those players because you've made new signings. You don't want to alienate them, so they chose to not play Allahyar as a result of those signings. Now, does that mean Allahyar should give up and not play? No, he should obviously try to get his place back. But I think it's become harder than he expected it to be to get in this squad. They haven't actually done that badly, Hull City, so they don't actually need Allahyar. If you look at it in that sense, they don't actually require his game. So from that perspective, I don't think it's a problem that he's not playing from Hull City's side of things. But from his own side of things, he's missing out on national team football. He's going to miss the Asian Cup potentially. So he has to find a club this January to get back in the national team, or at least build his career back again, because he's losing that touch now. He has to make sure that he gets a good club this January that offers him game time, guarantees him game time. It might mean stepping down 2 or 3 levels, to do that, but he has to do it because he's an important player. He's 22 years old. He's somebody who had so much talent as a youngster, and it's a shame to see a guy who was so good for the U17s in the 2017 U17 World Cup, scoring goals against Germany, and not playing. And then you've got the current U17 squad doing so well as well, but they're also potentially going to be in Allahyar's position in the next 4 or 5, 6 years. So that's the problem that we're facing with Iranian talents, is they're so good at young age, but they seem to have this Some of them, not all of them. Some of them seem to have a bad period within that kind of 20 to 25 years old, which kind of ruins their career when it gets to that key prime years.
Yeah, there's a point I was going to mention when we were going to mention the under-17s, but on Allahyar, it's a sad story that's happening right in front of our eyes because he was poised to go to the World Cup. He got a very, very bad injury, of course.
Yep.
Missed out on the World Cup, and I remember saying very, very I remember on the podcast we mentioned he needs to get fit, he needs to get training time, needs to get rehab, whatever, in order to put himself in a good position to go to the Asian Cup. In my opinion, the Asian Cup's done for him now. Like there's absolutely no chance he's going to be in the Asian Cup. It's finished in my opinion.
Well, he wouldn't start. He wouldn't start any matches if he went.
I don't even think they'll take him. Honestly,
no,
I don't even think they'll take him.
If they took him, he wouldn't start. That's the truth. He wouldn't play any matches. So.
But I mean, he hasn't been involved at all for like a year and a half. Like I don't think Ghalenoei is going to take that risk, personally.
Yeah.
So I don't see him even going unless there's maybe a lot of injuries last minute. But I don't see that happening. So it's a sad story, and now he's not playing for Hull City, and he was playing fairly consistently before. So yes, I think you're right. He needs to maybe step down a level. I don't think like he should stay at Hull City if he's not getting any game time. But I guess he needs to be part of that transition period because he is still a very young player and he's got a lot of potential.
I think Turkey is the best place for him to go to. I think Turkish league is a good league for him to settle in again because he was there as a youngster. He was a little bit too young for the league. But I think if he goes back there now, I think he would settle in well. So I think he has some offers from the Turkish league. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, cool. And then talking very, very briefly about the under-17 before we wrap up the podcast, I guess they've been doing fairly well in the World Cup right now in Jakarta. So they beat Brazil, amazing performance, and they very narrowly lost to England, which is a very sad, I guess, like result. They lost 2-1, and they're playing. I don't know which country they're playing.
New Caledonia.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard of them before. Sorry if you're listening from there, but they've been losing with like big sums, so that should be an expected win. I guess the only way that they will progress is if England beat Brazil, and Iran win, or they draw and Iran win the next game, and then they'll progress to the next round, which would be amazing to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the point you were making, and I guess like the point that I wanted to make as well, and it's the problem I have with our country is we are so talented. We have so much raw talent when it comes to football and sports.
Absolutely.
And that's proven by going head to head with the likes of England, going to with Brazil. These Brazilian youngsters are probably the most talented when it comes to football in the world. I would say.
They're defending champions of the U17s.
Yeah, exactly. What happens in that transition between under-17 to senior level where it just doesn't work out? It just doesn't work. Is it a lack of motivation? Is it the infrastructure that's lacking in our country compared to, say, England? Because England's infrastructure at that level is obviously very, very high. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's the visa situation. They can't play abroad in a lot of countries. It's something that we are missing. It's not talent. We have the talent. There's just a gap in between youth level to senior level.
I mean, I can speak about this for all day. You know that. Because the reality is, as you're mentioning, I put a tweet out today, which I've got a little bit of a stick for it. But England, if you ever go to even if you go to like League One academies, in England, like the third division of English football, fourth division,
or even universities. By the way,
like you don't understand the amount of opportunity, pampering, like the fantastic facilities, the amazing equipment, clothing that they have at their disposal.
Coaching as well.
Coaching, everything, really. I mean, okay, not everyone's amazing in England, but for the majority, a lot of it's pretty darn good, right? Like, it's not rubbish. Compared to Iran, when you compare it to Iran, it really is night and day. Like the quality of everything when it comes to everything in football. So when I say the England players should be ashamed of themselves for losing or not losing, for almost losing to Iran, what I really mean is I'm saying it from a holistic standpoint. England football as a whole should be absolutely smashing Iran in every department, in every game they ever face against Iran. And yeah, they absolutely smashed us at the World Cup in senior level, but that should have been the exact same performance in the U17 level. It should be no difference, absolutely no difference. If you look at the quality of like training, etc. But you can see, as you mentioned, Iranians have so much talent that at that age they can go head to head with England at U17 level. They can at that age, not at senior level, but definitely at youth level. They absolutely can, because they have a talent. They have the natural love for the game. It's so bred. Like, you know, compare us to other Asian countries. I don't think a lot of other Asian countries have as much passion for football as we do. In my opinion, I don't think a lot of countries, maybe Japan, potentially like Australia, but even Australia, I don't think.
No, not Australia.
No, not Australia.
No.
But even that, like maybe South Korea. But other than that, I really think we are one of the most passionate footballing nations in Asia, that we can produce players at a really high level. So if you combine that with what England have in infrastructure and youth development and grassroots development before even U17s, before they even get to U17s, if you can combine that with our talent level and our physical attributes that we've got as well, we would be easily one of the best nations in the world. You see that in our
We'd win the World
futsal.
Cup.
You see that in our futsal. You see that in volleyball. We see that in basketball, maybe in the past. You know, we've seen it in wrestling and in weightlifting. We have a lot of talent in sport, but it only comes down to the fact that we just don't have the right nurturing for these youngsters.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you. There's a gap between under 17 level and senior level, and that's the gap that's honestly, in my opinion, stopping us from getting to quarterfinals, semi-finals, even finals of World Cups. And I'm not even exaggerating there. I think we have the talent in order to compete with the big guys.
Yeah,
but
fair play to the Hossein Abdi, the head coach of the U17. He's done really well with this team to beat Brazil. Fantastic performance to come back and to do that against England. Great. Just hopefully they go as far as they can in this competition.
For sure. All right, cool. So I guess to recap, these two games that are coming up, the first game against Hong Kong is on the 16th of November, so Thursday. This podcast is coming out on Wednesday, so we've got a day. Might be coming out. You might be listening to it after the Hong Kong game.
We'll try and cover both. Obviously, we're trying to cover both games today, but we'll be back again after the matches are finished.
Yeah, of course. And then the Uzbekistan game will be on the 21st of November, so that's the Tuesday, so next Tuesday. And then that'll be the end of the international break. And I guess the next games we're playing as a national team will be the Asian Cup. So that's in January.
We'll have a little friendly match, I think, before the Asian Cup.
Nothing scheduled at the moment, but
I think we had one. I can't remember. It was against one of the kind of lower ranked Asian country. I can't remember who it was against. But it's a bit of an irrelevant friendly, to be honest with you, because we go straight to the Asian Cup after that.
Okay, yeah, and the first game is actually with Palestine, so I'm not even sure if that will go ahead, given recent events.
Yeah,
but yeah, we'll keep you updated for sure. So before we wrap up, what are the fan questions for this episode?
So we have one question here on Twitter, or on X as we call it nowadays, from at I love Iran 25. He's asking which players in U17 team you see as the future Team Melli players. I quite like our number 8, Razariniya. Amir Razariniya. He's done really well in midfield. He looks like a very complete midfielder. Seems to have a very good footballing brain, IQ, and I think that's going to translate well if he moves to Europe, because that's what European teams are looking for, players who are clever, especially as a midfielder. Obviously Nima Anders, who the right back, who I think somebody mentioned to me on Instagram or whatever, that He's like the Carvajal of Iranian football, which I actually do see. He plays a lot like Carvajal, to be honest. He has this kind of body type as well. He's quite stocky, and physical. He has that kind of style of play. So yeah, I think those two are very kind of top players. Beyond that, you have obviously Kasra Tahiri, who's kind of like a celebrity now. He's become very popular. I think that's because of his looks more than anything else. But he's a good footballer. Nothing to take away from him there. But yeah, he's very young. He's got a bit more to go, I think, than a few other players in the team. But I think other than that, obviously there are Koli Zadeh is a quite good player. The left back, Zolei looks pretty decent as well. And the goalkeeper, Arsha Shakuri, who made a bad attempt towards that game against England. But other than that, I think the team is solid. But I think those two, Nimandars and Razakini, are good players to look at.
But none of them play outside of Iran, right? They're still all in Iran.
No, yeah. We don't have. That's actually another thing. Why
it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Why we haven't brought in players, because there are young 17-year-olds who are playing in European leagues who haven't really been chosen.
I'll tell you what it is, and it's the reason why I think it's the thing that Carlos Queiroz changed was a scouting network. We don't have that.
No, I've mentioned it so many times. We don't have it. You look at countries like Turkey. Turkey has scouts all over Europe, in every country, and they just hire Turkish people, like a Turkish coach who works in Turkey, for example, in Germany or like France or whatever, to go and scout like 3 or 4 players a month. They paid him a very basic rate, and Turkey produced so many young players as a result of that from European countries. And if Iran did that, it would be unbelievably astounding. It just hasn't happened. But I can't keep going on about it. It's just not going to happen anytime soon.
I feel like you'd be perfect for that job.
Well, you never know. Next question we have here is, with 9 games, Ghalenoei's tenure as head coach of the national team, how satisfied are you with his managerial work up until this point? Well, we look at his statistics. He's played 9 games, 27 goals scored, and 5 goals conceded since the World Cup. Good statistics there. When you look at I'm going to be honest, I've not watched all of the matches since the World Cup. I've been very busy with work, but from what I have seen, there are still things we have to improve on. I think he needs to look at, can he get the right starting lineup? I think I'd love to see the youngsters come in and help out as the best they could, but I think he needs to find his style of play, which I think he started to do slowly but surely. I think Saman Ghoddos is going to be key for him in that midfield. So in that sense, he needs to make use of Saman Ghoddos. If he can do that, I think he'll be so good for the national team. I think he's done well though. I don't want to criticize Ghalenoei. I think we were quite harsh with him. Not harsh, but I think we were quite critical of him when he first came in. I think he's done well, so I don't want to be too critical of Ghalenoei at this point. We'll see how he gets on in the Asian Cup, of course. I don't know.
I think one thing that he's added to, I guess, our style of play that hadn't been there before, maybe it's because of his player selection.
Yeah,
with Rezayan and Ghoddos is set pieces. That was an area of our game where we weren't really that dangerous before. And I guess now he's added it. And like against Qatar, we scored 2 goals from corners, I think, right? And then before as well, we scored a few from set pieces. That's the area of the game that I've been impressed with, but that might be just because of the selection of players. I think where he maybe falls down upon is game management, and how he sort of manages his players on an individual basis. For instance, Pirelli Ganji going in for a challenge like that in a friendly when the momentum was on their side, didn't make sense. He was risking himself, and I feel like obviously a manager can only do so much. But I've seen a few challenges, a few like pretty reckless challenges or risky challenges in the penalty box, especially from like Cannoni, where he could maybe manage that a bit better. Mm-hmm. But again, there's only so much a manager can do.
Yeah, with Cannoni, it's kind of a hard thing to do, to be honest with you. That guy's just a bit.
He's just hot. He's hot-headed.
He's just not easy to deal with whatsoever. And that's a question actually we got from Twitter from Conscious Flesh, asking, is he so much better than the competition that we have? He's a good player. He's not rubbish. You know, he scored two goals against Qatar. He's not a bad player. He's just a bit of a, you know, I word. You know, I don't want to say it, but he's a bit of an I word. You know, he just isn't a great personality to have around the team. This is his reality. The previous question, got the question from at Robert84915, and we also had it from the Javadi Kid. Couple questions to go. We have a question here from Rahbar Omid 90. He asks, given Prali Ganji's injury, will the defense be able to hold down the back line in his absence? Yeah, I don't think Prali Ganji would ever really start for the national team anymore. Even if he was fit, I don't really see him as a starter anymore. I think Majid Hosseini and Kanoni are the main two, for now, anyway. And then last question, we go from Instagram. We got one here from Resinho.ftbl. He asks, how does this U17 team compare to the one in 2017, which we came on to earlier about Allahyar? Good question, actually, because that U17 team was pretty good. You know, they beat Germany like 4-0 or something like that. So they were a very good U17 team under Abbas Chamanian, the head coach, and now this one's obviously under Hossein Abdi. I think they're similar in the sense they have very talented players in each team. That team had Younes Delphi, they had Taha Shariati, Amir Ismail Zadeh, I think was it the centre back, Mohamed Sharifi, I think was it playing that team, if I'm not mistaken, and a few other players. But none of them really, Younes Delphi, who we interviewed, none of them have have made it at all. You know, none of them, literally. Like Allahyar, we thought would be the only one who makes it, and even he's now in limbo, you know. So none of them have really come out to be anything at this point. So even though this U17 team is very talented, it looked really good, is it because they've got a very good team, and it's because Hossein Abdi's done so well to get this team to play well together, and not so much the individuals being that great? Or is it because we do have good individuals? I don't know. And if we do, are they going to become something in the next 5 years when it matters, you know? So it's the hard. It'd be a real shame if the whole team, we don't get at least 2 stars from it, you know? But it is what it is. We need to wait and see what happens. That's all.
All right, nice. Well, thank you so much for the questions. Really like hearing them, so do keep sending them in. I guess we'll wrap up the podcast there. So thank you so much for listening, you guys at home, and enjoy the 2 games. We'll be back with another podcast after the Uzbekistan game.
Yeah, and spaces as well before the matches as well.
And spaces before the game. So definitely do keep your notifications on X, formerly Twitter. And it feels weird saying that. It just doesn't feel right.
I don't know why they changed it, but it is what it is, you know.
I don't know. It's not the right podcast to talk about it.
No.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and see you very soon. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Saman Ghoddos. I'm playing for the Iranian national team and Brentford Football Club, and you are listening to Bezan podcast.